Hi everyone, I hope you have been enjoying the Tata Chess tournament. With 3 rounds gone, there are 3 players tied for first place. World champion Vishy Anand is one of them, having scored 2 victories, including a superb miniature against Aronian that King's Crusher has already covered. It seems he's back in form. Also tied for first is Harikrishna, who's off to a great start with 2 wins out of 3 games, and Magnus Carlsen as well. Today is a rest day, which I've decided are the days on which I'm going to report on the tournament. The best game so far definitely goes to Vishy's win over Aronian, especially considering that he has had problems playing Aronian in the past, but as I said, that's already been covered on YouTube. So I thought we'd look at one of Carlsen's games instead. In the 3rd round he played against Pentala Harikrishna, who isn't quite so famous as Vishy, but is still a phenomenal Indian talent. At 26.98, he's just 2 points shy of the 2700 elite, although still a remarkable 160 points behind Carlsen. So to get the game going, Carlsen had white and opened with e4, to which Harikrishna replied e5, and next came knight f3. And knight c6. All normal so far. But here Carlsen played the surprise move c3, which was pretty incredible to see. At Grandmaster level, it's almost always bishop b5 instead of c3, leading to the well-analyzed Roy Lopez, or an immediate d4 going into the Scotch game. This move c3 is called the Ponziani opening. It first appeared in chess literature over 500 years ago. The idea, of course, is to play d4 and create a powerful pawn center. The problem is that this is a pawn move in the opening, and thus has the potential to leave white behind in development and not readily able to defend a vigorous counterattack in the center. It also creates a hole here on d3 and has a few other drawbacks. It's a tactical opening, and thus has the potential to leave white behind in development, which I already told you about. And you know, it's a slightly unusual choice from Carlsen, because it's not a positional opening, which generally is his style. As I said, it's more tactical, and it has a low drawing percentage, so it leads to lots of decisive games. But it's largely considered inferior to bishop b5, or even bishop c4 is considered stronger than this move c3. However, all leading commentators have described it as a rich and varied opening. Bruce Pandolfini, the chess author and teacher, said that it remains to be seen whether the Ponziani is an opening of the past or of the future, which I thought was an interesting observation. In any case, this game is again proof that Carlsen's opponents never know what to expect, and that he's confident enough to depend on his raw talent, even when playing supposedly suboptimal openings. Harikrishna responded with knight f6, which is one of the main lines, and you know, black scores well here, although white is still ahead statistically in most databases. The sharpest response, instead of knight f6, is d5. Where black even scores better than white by some accounts. And note that playing c3 here means that there is no knight c3, which is another of the drawbacks of the opening. And you know, in this case with d5, it means that after e takes d5, queen takes d5, white can't develop with tempo with knight c3, you know, attacking the queen like in the Scandinavian. The line that the opening gets its name from is f5 at this point, which is the Ponziani counter gambit, first conceived by the Italian Domenico Lorenzo Ponziani about 250 years ago. Somehow, since then, apparently through erroneous chess literature, the entire opening after c3 is named after him. So back to the game continuation anyway. Knight f6 is what Harikrishna has just played. And so now white continues with d4. And you know, black's last move, attack d4 with the knight here on f6, and this answer d4 completely ignores it. And this is the main line after knight f6. And Harikrishna now continued with a less common sideline, which is d5. And you know, it can almost be argued that if black is allowed to soundly play both e5 and d5 in the opening, then he is equalized. Alternatives at this point were knight takes e4, where best play goes d5, knight e7, and knight takes e5, where white is better, and it's starting to look pretty tactical already, although it's still fairly drawish going by the statistics. Another possibility is e takes d4, where would come e5. And you know, in these last two variations we've seen some of the strength in white achieving his ideal pawn center, because he can knock these knights back, which you know we've looked at in the videos on my system. And Nimzovich would be happy, you know, about these pawn advances. It's one of the things he discussed and emphasized in the part of the book that dealt with openings. Best play here would continue knight e4, or maybe even knight d5, and now white has several options to choose from. In my opinion, it's best not to go after this e4 pawn, which is giving white what he wants, and instead to play d5 on the third move, and you know, I think claim equality at worst. Okay, so back to the game. d5 is what Harikrishna has just played. So now Carlsen continued with bishop b5, developing all his pieces nicely in one move. And this pins the knight and thus attacks the e5 pawn with the knight here on f3, and gains total control of the e5 square. So Harikrishna continued with e takes d4, so there's no knight takes e5 on the next move. And this is the correct move and retains an equal position. If instead knight takes e4, white is slightly better after knight takes e5. There's this pin here, which you know keeps the initiative, and this knight on e5 is very nicely placed. White would be looking good here out of the opening. Now the other possibility is d takes e4, but then knight takes e5, and this is even better for white. This pawn here on e4 is going to be hard to defend. So after e takes d4 came e5 from Carlsen, and this is the spirit of the Ponziani, these advancing pawns in the center. Black has to press forwards with knight e4, anything else and white is definitely better. And here the position again remains equal. White now retains the initiative with knight takes d4, exploiting this pin and threatening to win a pawn on c6, more or less forces bishop d7, where after bishop takes c6, b takes c6, white has given up the bishop pair in return for damaging black pawn structure. And this is why black recaptured with the pawn in order to retain the slight squared bishop, which in theory should be a strong piece in resulting positions. And white can now continue with a concrete positional strategy, considering that the black pawns are fractured like this, and there's structural weakness, for example, on c5, and also c6 is a hole in the black position. And black, on the other hand, will have the b file to work with, and you know, there's very nice imbalance in the position. This e4 knight is excellently posted, and white has this mobile pawn on e5 which black has to keep an eye on, and of course this damaged structure to play against, which you know all bodes well for an interesting middle game. Carlsen now castled, and Harikrishna continued development with bishop e7, and Carlsen did the same with bishop e3, which takes aim at c5, which is a weakness in the black position, as I said, and this move makes it dangerous for black to play c5 and kick this nicely posted knight on d4, because this would weaken his position further. In particular, if he moves the c pawn, then the d5 pawn becomes very weak and it can't be advanced because white is controlling this d4 square nicely. So Harikrishna now castled, and Carlsen challenged the well posted knight with knight d2, and exchanging this would lose a couple of tempi, because this knight has taken 2 moves to get here. If it captures, it's going to be 3 moves to capture, and piece that's only moved once. And it's also unwise to try and support the knight, so Harikrishna played knight c5. And the drawback of this is that white can now knock it back further with b4, and the knight is pretty crazy looking on b7, pretty much entirely out of the game. The only other possibility was knight e6. It is also playable, but according to the engine, white is slightly better after knight 2 b3, just securing this square as a strategical base for middle game operations, or even knight f5 is also good here. Okay, that's the end of part 1.